So what if the big earthquakes we see around the globe aren't just random, isolated events? What if they're all connected, part of a single planetary system? Well, today we're going to dig into a really fascinating theory called the space river, which argues exactly that. And its supporters are saying that some very recent events have just given them all the proof they need.
I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, right? It comes directly from the people behind the theory. What they're saying is, we told you so. They believe they made a major prediction that just came true and that the clues were out there for anyone to see, if you just knew what to look for. Okay, let's get into this.
So at the very heart of all this are two huge seismic events that happened back on March 10th. First, you have a magnitude 6.1 earthquake in the Tyrrhenian Sea right off the coast of Italy. And then, almost at the same time, a magnitude 6.5 quake hits on the exact opposite side of the planet, down on the Pacific-Antarctic Ridge. You might think, wow, what a coincidence. This theory says, nope, no coincidence at all.
So let's start by really unpacking these two events. They are the twin pillars that this entire planetary story is built on. Okay, now this is where the details get really interesting. That quake in Italy wasn't just a 6.1. I mean, look at that depth, 377 kilometers thick. To put that in perspective for you, almost every earthquake we ever feel happens up in the crust, which is usually less than 70 kilometers thick. This was happening way, way down in the Earth's mantle. And then its partner, the M6.5, hits at its antipode, its direct opposite point on the globe. The timing, the depth, the location, the sheer synchronization of these two is everything this theory hinges on.
But how could anyone possibly have seen this coming? Well, the argument is that the warnings didn't come from our fancy technology. They came from nature itself. Let's take a look at the so-called animal oracles, who supposedly gave us a heads up that this was all about to go down. The people behind the theory actually laid out a specific 10-day window to watch. It all kicked off with what they called a deep-sea scout on March 3rd, sort of an initial feeler from the ocean. That was followed by a northern trigger on March 4th, an event they believe officially set the whole system in motion. And then, bam, it all led to the planetary response, those twin quakes we just talked about on March 10th. So what was this first clue? Well, it was the stranding of a beaked whale in Auckland, New Zealand. And this happened a full week before the earthquakes. And this is the key. Beaked whales are incredible deep-sea divers. They are specialists of the abyss. The theory goes that this whale was acting like a living, breathing sensor. It stranded itself because it was sensing massive disturbances coming from deep within the Earth's mantle. A perfect preview for that 377-kilometer-deep earthquake that was about to happen on the other side of the world. But the warnings weren't just coming out of the ocean. Apparently, they were also coming from the skies and from some of the most powerful predators on land.
You know, this is where it gets really wild. Over in Europe, there were reports of something called a bird wreck, which is basically just birds becoming completely disoriented. The theory says this was caused by a massive surge in the magnetic flux between the poles. At the very same time, lions in a zoo in China reportedly became extremely aggressive. And the trigger for all of this? A magnitude 6.4 earthquake in Alaska on March 4th, which they say sent this invisible wave of energy rippling across the planet.
This whole lion thing even has a name within the theory, geomagnetic rage. It's this idea that top predators are super sensitive to these pre-earthquake shifts. Things like ultra-low frequency sound and changes in the magnetic field that we are just completely unaware of. Now, we know lots of animals use the magnetic field to navigate, but this idea that they can sense pre-seismic ULF noise and get this agitated, that's a really core and, more speculative part of this whole idea.
Okay, let's go back to Italy, because that deep earthquake wasn't the end of the story there. It was actually a catalyst, and it had some immediate and pretty concerning effects on the region's very famous volcanoes.
Just remember this number, 4 centimeters per month. That is the rate of ground swelling, or uplift, that's considered the critical danger zone for the Campi Flegrei supervolcano. The ground there is literally swelling, and this huge deep earthquake just poured gasoline on the fire. So how does an earthquake that's nearly 400 kilometers deep even affect a volcano on the surface? Well, the concept they used is called a mantle bell. Imagine ringing a giant bell deep, deep underground. The vibrations don't just stay down there, right? They travel upwards, and they transfer all that stress directly into the crust right above it.
And this breaks down that chain reaction perfectly. So, step 1, that deep M6.1 quake rings the bell. Step 2, that stress shoots straight up. Step 3, this increases the pressure under the whole volcanic system there, including Campi Flegrei.
And that leads to step 4. The ground uplift speeds up, pushing it closer and closer to that dangerous 4 centimeter per month warning level.
Okay, so the animal warnings were spotted, the 10-day window was called, and the twin quakes hit right on cue. It kind of sounds like case closed, right? But according to this theory, the watch is far from over. This planetary system is still in motion.
So let's just recap that sequence real quick. You have the northern trigger in Alaska, you have the deep mantle event under Italy, and you have the southern response down at the Antarctic Ridge. It's a clear, 3-stage flow of energy that, proponents argue, played out exactly the way they said it would.
And here's the crucial part. This massive reshuffling of planetary stress might not be done yet. The energy that's been set in motion is still moving, still propagating, and it's looking for its next and maybe final place to be released.
Which leaves us with a really provocative final question. The original material warns everyone to keep an eye on unusual animal behavior, specifically in South America and California. Is the planet just getting ready for one last big adjustment? Where is all this energy going to end up? According to this theory, the answer might already be out there. You just have to be watching the right signs.